Good morning to all and welcome to this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Let me welcome all the officials of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, the Ministry of Finance, Investment Division, Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, and Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited. My name is Wade Mark. I'm the chairman of this committee. And I just want to brief members and our officials on the work that we do. The Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, the PAEC, has a mandate to consider and report to the House of Representatives on the following: the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. We are all through the Auditor General report. In fact, the Auditor General report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements, and most importantly, whether policy is carried out efficiently. I want to emphasize this one: whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. Now, the purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to continue the examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, TPHL, for the financial year ended September 30th, 2019, with specific reference to Heritage Petroleum Company Limited and Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited. Our committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at Heritage Petroleum Company Limited and Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. Now, the role of our committee is to help. May I repeat? The role of our committee is to help Heritage Petroleum Company Limited as well as Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited improve its delivery or their delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. So that is very important. Our meeting, this meeting, is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and of course the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email parl101@ttparliament.org, Facebook/ttparliament, X, formerly Twitter, @ttparliament. Now, what I would like to do at this time is to ask our members, the members of our committee who are present, to introduce themselves, starting with the members on my immediate right.
Hi, good morning, Rushton Paria, Vice Chairman.
Good morning all, welcome. Hazel Thompson Ahi, member, and Happy New Year.
Good morning all, Keith Scotland, member.
And may I ask my colleague on my immediate
Hi,
left?
good morning, Stephen McClatchy, member.
Thank you. At this time, I'll want to take this opportunity on behalf of the committee to ask the members of the following, from the following entities to introduce themselves. Firstly, let us begin with officials from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Penelope Bradshaw-Niles, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy.
Anyone else with you, ma'am?
Yes, I have Mr. Mark Rudder, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Those are all?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division. Can I ask Ministry of Finance to introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. I'm Sharon Mohammed, Director, Agro-Based Manufacturing Services Sector for the Investments Division, Ministry of Finance.
Thank you and welcome. At this time, may I invite officials? Oh, there is someone else? Thank you, sorry about that. My apologies. And may I now invite officials from the Heritage Petroleum Company Limited to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michael Corman. I'm Chairman of Heritage Petroleum Company Limited.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Eric Keskila, Chief Executive Officer for Heritage Petroleum.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. Renola Jodha Singh, Deputy Chairman, Heritage.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Ms. Kathleen Allen, Chief Financial Officer, Acting.
Okay.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Alison Ramlogan, Commercial Manager at Heritage Petroleum.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne Sinanansing, Corporate Secretary.
Okay, at this time, may I invite members, officials of Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Newman George. I'm the Chairman of Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. My name is Mustaq Mohammed. I'm the General Manager of Paria Fuel Trading Company.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee members. My name is Darnell and I'm the Finance Lead, Paria Fuel Trading.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Lydia Dundial, Commercial Lead at Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited.
Anyone else from Paria? Oh, that's your quota. Thank you. May I at this time warmly extend an invitation to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, to make a few brief opening remarks at this time. Madam Permanent Secretary.
Thank you, Chair. Heritage Petroleum Company Limited and Paria Fuel Trading Limited remain a vital members to the domestic energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to Heritage Petroleum, the company since its inauguration has successfully pursued exploration, development, production and marketing of crude oil through its operations, land and offshore. In 2024, the government awarded, together with the actual operators, Heritage carried participation in 3 out of 5 onshore blocks, allowing them the opportunity to continue to expand their operations. With respect to Paria Fuel Trading, they continue to supply uninterrupted fuel supplies to Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll want to extend that same invitation by inviting the representative of the Ministry of Finance Investment Division to also make a brief statement at this time.
Thank you, Chairman. The Investment Division of the Ministry of Finance is responsible for executing the investment policy as prescribed by Cabinet. The mandate of the division includes oversight, monitoring, and where necessary, the rationalization of government equity holding in commercial enterprises. TPHL is an integrated national oil and gas company in Trinidad and Tobago, incorporated with the responsibility to hold the entire shareholding of Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, the Guacara Refining Company Limited, and Petroleum. So we look forward to this morning's discussion.
Thank you. I'll now ask Mr. Kwamina, Chairman of Heritage, to make a few brief opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I took the opportunity to take a look at our transcript from the last occasion and realized that I did make a fairly substantial opening statement, but not one to be left out. I just want to make a couple of comments. That Heritage and Paria have reported profitable results in fiscal year 2019 with $1.4 billion and $109.3 million respectively, while contributing combined TT 1.2 billion of tax, royalties, levies, and license payments to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm pleased to present a high-level overview of the financial statements for the fiscal year 2019, which would have marked the first 10 months of operations for Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. Even with the work to establish a new company, Heritage, in my respectful view, demonstrated strong performance during this initial period. Heritage recorded revenue of TT 5.4 billion, EBITDA of 2.3 billion, and a profit of TT 1.4 billion. This achievement was made possible by stabilizing the base to recover production and replace reserves while building the organization from the ground up. Heritage achieved these results by funding a TT 193 million capital program focused primarily on stabilizing production and improving asset integrity. This resulted in successfully ensuring quarter-on-quarter production growth with total annualized production of 38.4 thousand barrels of oil per day. The underlying reserve replacement ratio was 104% when normalized for the divestiture of Block 3A during the period. During the period, Heritage paid TT 1.3 billion to service a legacy debt, and it contributed 821 million to the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago through taxes, licenses, royalties, and levies. It is particularly noteworthy that Heritage also introduced MOLO crude to the international market and developed key trading relationships to maintain competitive prices for this new crude. Heritage sold 23 cargoes for the period, with the differential to Brent ranging from US $8 to as low as $2. Within the last few years, Heritage has been solidifying its position as a crude trader in the industry. gradually expanding its reach and capitalizing on opportunities in an ever-evolving global oil market. In closing, I wish to reiterate that both Heritage and, stepping on Mr. Newman George's toes, Paria, have demonstrated profitability in 2019 and beyond, despite the challenges faced from the transition from Petroleum. So those are my brief opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Coroner. I'll now invite Mr. Newman, Paria's chairman, to make a brief statement. Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to present a high-level overview of the financial statements for the fiscal year 2019, which marks the first 10 months of operations for Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited. Despite the challenges we face, the company demonstrated a strong performance during this initial period. Paria recorded revenue of TT 7.3 billion while navigating within a low-margin business environment with a gross margin of just 4.7%. We successfully generated profit after taxes amounting to TT 109 million. This achievement was made possible through careful management of our vested resources and effective cost control measures as we continue to expand our customer base in the regional market. In fiscal 2019, 39% of our sales volumes and revenues originated from the regional market. At the end of the reporting period, we maintained healthy cash balances of TT 486 million, with cash flows generated from operating activities totaling TT 487.7 million. It is important to highlight that with the offer for sale of the refinery and terminaling assets, Paria's financials were prepared on an as held for sale as of April the 1st, 2019. Consequently, a full year's depreciation expense was not charged to the income statement. Had we prepared the financials as a going concern for the entire period, the additional depreciation impact would have totaled TT 68 million, resulting in a revised profit after tax of TT 41 million. Still a commendable outcome. In 2019, we achieved significant milestones. We ensured that our local market was adequately supplied with fuel, and of the 13.4 million barrels traded, 7.2 million barrels were sold locally. Additionally, we facilitated the safe export of 11.2 million barrels of crude from our sister company, Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. However, we faced challenges during this period due to market volatility surrounding the impending COVID-19 pandemic, which eventually resulted in a decrease in demand in both local and regional markets. It is noteworthy that in fiscal 2019 and in all subsequent years, Paria has consistently functioned as an earner of foreign exchange from our regional sales and bunkering operations, generating an estimated annual revenue of approximately US 800 million. Our activities within the regional market have proven to be self-sustaining and demonstrates significant growth potential, reinforcing Paria's role as a key contributor to the national economy. Finally, I would like to provide an update on the matter discussed at the last committee meeting regarding the audit investigation into the fishing incident that occurred at Paria in October 2022. In our written response to the committee in May 2024, we indicated that Paria was involved in a lawsuit in a Florida district court alongside other parties affected by the fraud, and that settlement discussions were ongoing. I am pleased to inform you that Paria has successfully recovered approximately 75% of the losses incurred from the incident, which I consider commendable, seeing that it was an international cyber attack and the short duration for resolution of this. This incident underscored the critical importance of robust cybersecurity practices and the need for ongoing vigilance in our operations. Since implementing additional controls, Paria has not experienced any further cyber attacks. As we move forward, we remain committed to transparency and accountability, and I look forward, with the assistance of Paria's management, to addressing any questions or concerns you may have regarding our financial performances and future outlook. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Newman George. Once again, let me take this opportunity to warmly welcome the officials from not only Paria and Heritage, but I know that Mr. Kwamina is the chairman of the Holdings Company, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. And let me wish you all and the company a very successful 2025. Now, let me begin by asking a few questions as I seek to clarify issues arising out of our last engagement. Now, I have information that Heritage Petroleum, as well as Paria Fuel Trading Company, have submitted their financials to the Ministry of Finance for the period 2020, I think, and 21. We are yet to see those statements in the Parliament. I understand that would have been done sometime around August or September of this year. So before I deal with the consolidation as manifested and through Trinidad Petroleum Company, Holdings Company, I would like to begin by asking the representative, Mrs. Mohammed, for some kind of guidance and clarification on what I've just said. Is the Ministry of Finance in possession of Heritage Financial's audited financial statements for 2020, 2021, 2022, as well as same Paria Trading Fuel Company for the same period? Can you clarify for us?
Chairman, I confirm that the Ministry of Finance has in its possession both Paria and Heritage audited financial statements for 2020 to 2022. I confirm that the Ministry of Finance Investments Division has in its possession the audited financial statements for both Paria and Heritage.
Can you advise this committee when you received those? The ministry, not you. When the ministry received it, those reports rather?
Not offhand, we would have received it.
A rough estimated period. You don't have to be specific. You can always write us and tell us.
We'll receive it annually. So
yes, I know, but...
So we may have... Ready?
You can't say?
Can't see. I'll have to check our records.
Right. Well, can you indicate to us why the ministry has not submitted same to the Parliament so that we would have those before us?
So,
and why and when you are going to do it?
So in accordance with our manual, we submit where the Minister of Finance has 25% or more direct shareholding. Then that's what we are required to submit to the Parliament. We do not have direct shareholding in Paria and Heritage. That's why we submit the consolidated financial statements for the TPHL, the Trinidad Petroleum Heritage Holdings Company.
Okay,
It is not a requirement
okay,
for the subsidiaries to be submitted.
to be submitted, okay.
Yes.
Well, can you advise us about the consolidated financials through TPHL? I think that is that is in the law. Am I right? That is in the law that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, representing the state, does not have more than 25% shareholdings or interest in either Heritage or Paria. Am I right? Is that in the law, Mr. Kwamina? We'll have to inquire into that. But let's go on. Can you clarify for this committee what is the status of the consolidated accounts? Have you received those?
Chairman, we have not received the consolidated financial statements for Trinidad Petroleum Holding Company Limited to date. A status was provided that while they have completed the Paria and the Heritage, Guayakara and Petroleum remain outstanding. So the subsidiaries audits are to be completed, and then it's consolidated into the group financial statements. So they are waiting. They have some issues to be dealt with the auditors in order to finish the auditing of Guayakara and Petrotrin. And then it will be consolidated. We were given an assurance that that will be completed this year, and we will get our financial statement, our consolidated financial statements.
Now, this is a very, in fact, your permanent secretary, the permanent secretary, I should say, in her opening remarks, spoke to the importance to our economy and country of both Heritage and Paria. So you could imagine my shock, consternation, Mr. Chairman of TPHL, that no consolidated financial statement, audited financial statements since 2019. And we understand the transition and the challenges. But we are now in 2025. And we are being told, and I think I need to get clarification from the chairman of the TPHL, Mr. Kwamina. Can you explain to this committee what are the issues preventing the completion of Guayakara Refinery financial audited accounts from being submitted to the Ministry of Finance, and what are the issues inhibiting the submission of the audited financial statements for Petrotrin Legacy? Because I understand from the Ministry of Finance representative, Mrs. Mohammed, that you need to have all four in order to have the consolidated financial statement coming from the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. Can we have an explanation for this delay? And that is part one, because I have to come with another part now, because you have given us a commitment in writing when you were last here. But I'll come to that. Just deal with the first part.
Sure.
What are the issues preventing the completion of those two financial audited statements?
Much obliged. Mr. Chairman, as one would expect, the transitioning and restructuring of Petrotrin has posed significant challenges for the auditing of the financial statements. The establishment of the group and the split of assets was exceptionally complex for several reasons, and it took a considerable amount of time to address these matters. Further, for obvious reasons, a primary focus was placed on the initial reorganization of the debt and its subsequent transfer from TPHL to Heritage, which was critical. This was a layered and intricate matter which included dealing with foreign regulators and was successfully executed, as you know, in May of 2022. In parallel to the reorganization of the debt, the split of the assets and the transfers from Petrotrin to Heritage, Paria, and Guaracara had to be accompanied by physical asset verification exercises, counts, supporting valuations, and given the volume, nature of the assets, and time lost due to, amongst other things, the COVID pandemic, there were significant delays in completing the review. Following the verification exercises, agreements had to be refreshed and financials updated, including in those updates with the reconciliation and resolution of the intercompany balances. This could not be completed without the completion of the reorganization of the debt, along with the asset transfer reconciliations being done and updated. Finally, and more specifically to Petrotrin, there were difficulties in completing the Petrotrin financial year 2019 audit, as supporting documentation to verify the financial statements were difficult, if not impossible, to locate, and if located, were in many instances incomplete. Management was also at the same time concerned with responding to legal matters and claims, negotiating settlements, and resolving other asset and intercompany matters. Significant progress has since been made on providing updated information for the completion of Petrotrin's outstanding audits. Finally, financial audits were prioritized with the reviews of the operational entities, Heritage and Paria. I repeat, the operational entities. And those were conducted first given the requirements of the credit agreement dated 5th of May 2022. The external auditors were also limited in respect to the resources to concomitantly complete the reviews of all the entities, as well as an independent third-party consultant had to be engaged to complete dismantlement calculations, which is both a lengthy and complex exercise. Mr. Chairman, I know that I think on the last occasion, we had suggested that Petrotrin and GRC were ongoing and should be completed by September 30th, 2024. And in relation to Petrotrin, I would leave GRC to Mr. George, but in relation to Petrotrin, I would tell you specifically the issues in relation to Petrotrin have resulted around A, still verification of debts owed to suppliers and the auditors being satisfied that those debts are firstly verified and in fact accurate. And secondly, in relation to, I think the only outstanding matter now in relation to Petrotrin has to do with dealing with the tax liability. So there would have been taxes that were not paid by Petrotrin, and those up until this point in time by the accountants have been treated in a certain way, and the auditors have a concern as to how that is being treated, and that is now requiring us to communicate with the Ministry of Finance to resolve. And I think, as far as I am concerned, subject to correction, that is the last issue that needs to be resolved so that the Petrotrin financials can be completed and submitted.
Would you therefore be in a position to indicate to us when the consolidated financials for TPHL for 2020 and 2021 would be finalized and submitted to the Ministry of Finance?
If I can ask,
and then to us.
If I can ask the Deputy Chairman, who grew out with the financial aspect, to respond to that.
Sure. So, Chairman, as our Chairman have indicated, there is the audits of 2020 and 2021 have been substantially completed for Petrotrin. There's one outstanding issue, is the treatment of interest and penalties on taxes. This is currently being debated with the Ministry of Finance, and we expect that to be completed in this quarter, the first quarter of this year. Following which, we would complete Petrotrin and then have the consolidated TPHL accounts submitted.
Mr. Kwamina, as you rightly indicated a short while ago, when we were last here, you recognized and shared with this committee some of the challenges. But even in the face of the challenges that we face, that is TPHL, you give an undertaking, and we take your word very seriously. So let me just quote for the record, because I don't want another undertaking and we don't get any results. So let me just quote for the record what you told this committee when we last met. We were given the commitment, and I quote, by September 2024, the audited financials for both Petrotrin, because at that time we had completed both Heritage and Paria. So for both Petrotrin and Guara, for the financial year 2020 and 2021 would be completed. Therefore, TPHL would be able to do the consolidated for up to 2021. Now, Mr. Kwamina, you were here with your team in April of last year, and it is disconcerting, it is disappointing that we still do not have 20, we don't even have 20, and far less 2021.
Okay.
So I would like to get from you as a chairman of the TPHL, can you tell this committee when we are going to be receiving the consolidated financials for TPHL for 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023? So at least we'll have an idea once again.
Just to deal with the first aspect of your question, having heard what was indicated on the last occasion, I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, that insofar as the completion of Petrotrin is concerned, by September of October, Petrotrin was complete, save for this tax issue that we have raised. And that tax issue has taken some significant time to resolve, and it is not yet resolved. So that is, I mean, all of the work had been done, and I mean, I personally have met with the auditors on 3 or 4 occasions, Mr. Ajula Singh even more so, and we really pushed them to get them to, so they did meet except for this issue, and it is a differing of opinion between how it was treated by one of the Big Four companies versus the current Big Four company that is auditing. So they're having this dispute. So I don't think that there's much keeping us back from getting the Petrotrin done, and I think I'll ask Mr. Judah Singh again, because he liaises more directly with the auditors to see when those consolidated will possibly be done.
Okay.
So is it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the tax issue basically Up until 2019, we had one auditor, external auditor, and we switched to another auditor, KPMG to E&Y in 2020. There was a different opinion, different views on how a certain item on the tax should be treated. And this is the source of the delay in terms of resolving. We have progressed significantly, and we expect, as we say, a resolution for 2020 and 2021 by the first quarter of this year. And following which, we will complete the audit of Petroleum, and also Guaracara, and also the Consolidated TPHL. I cannot give a date for 2022 at this point in time, but following the completion of the Consolidated TPHL at the end of this quarter, we will be able to give a time for 2022 and 2023.
I just want to indicate that I'm putting TPHL on notice that we will be summoning you, or should I say inviting you, to come back here in short order, because we have given you almost, it is almost about close to 9 months to fulfill a commitment, and that has not happened. So we'll have to closely, Mr. Kwamina, monitor this company, and you'll have to be re-invited here to give us an account of this matter, because we are getting undertakings for a second time. We understand the challenges, but those challenges should have been overcome.
Well, I mean, if you understand the challenges, I'm not too clear on.
Well, I don't know. You want to share those? You see, we don't know the details of it, so that is why I have to be making these statements.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to, it's not highly, the fact about it is there are two, in fact, both in relation to Guaracara and in relation to Petroleum, there are two very academic accounting issues. As I indicated, in relation to Petroleum, the treatment of this tax. As in relation to Guaracara, it has to do with the question as to whether it's an asset held for sale and proper definition. And what happens as a consequence of that is that there's arguments between ourselves and the auditors, and then there's arguments between the auditors and our line ministries, etc., and so forth. And that has to be resolved. And we are pressing them as much as we can. I don't easily give undertakings. So I don't have a record. I must have said that we will have it done by that point in time. But the point about it is that, as you say, Mr. Chairman, you recognize that there are challenges, and there are challenges. This is certainly not a question that we're sitting back and thinking that it doesn't have to be done. And I will remind you, Mr. Chairman, that I suppose, believe it or not, I'm more fearful of our lenders, who also are anxious to see the consolidated documents. So the point about it is that there is a lot of incentive to get this thing completed as quickly as possible. But as you know, accounting regulations are changing regularly, and we are trying to meet those requirements.
All right. As I said, we'll follow it up and take it from there. The other area I want to just deal with briefly, if I ask my other colleagues to come in, is this phishing and fraud that occurred early in your transition, amounting to 200,000 or thereabout US. And tell me if I'm correct here. In your statement, the total is, and that is for Paria I'm referring to here, is it US 200,264? $200,264.42. Is that the correct figure, Mr. Newman George? That
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
right. And there's another figure of TT $168,545.02. Or what is that about? Because I'm seeing two figures.
Hi, morning again, Chair.
Yes,
The TT amount of the 168 was the VAT portion of that invoice, and that was successfully paid to the supplier, so there was no issue with that portion.
okay, okay. All right, but, Mr. George, you did indicate, that you have recovered 75%. Do you anticipate the other 25% coming to the people of Trinidad and Tobago through
Mr.
Paria?
Chairman, I would,
Or do you think that you'll have to write off that as a loss?
let me ask my finance lead to make a comment on that, please, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Hi, Chairman, again. The recovered amount, as indicated, was 147,000 US. The difference, we think we'll have to write off that amount based on the settlement.
When you say settlement with the fraudsters, the people who stole our money, when you say settlement with whom?
Chair, following the incident, a lawsuit was filed by another party impacted by the fraud. Paria was joined in this claim due to its involvement in the fraudulent transaction, and the litigation resulted in the freezing of the account where the funds were diverted. So the funds were diverted to an account in the US, and there were other parties affected by this phishing incident. When the legal proceedings unfolded, it became clear that the uncertainty and costs associated with the litigation was significant for all parties involved. Consequently, an agreement was reached to settle the matter in a way that was mutually beneficial. And this is where Paria was able to recover the 75% of the losses after all parties agreed on settlement.
Do we have a copy of that judgment? Can you make it available to this committee so we can look at it?
Yes, we can, Chair.
Okay. Now, Mr. George, has anyone been held accountable in Paria for this this transaction? First of all, let me just back. Was this matter reported to the fraud squad in the TTPS, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service? Was this matter reported to the TTPS? I think they have a fraud squad section of the police service at all?
Chairman, I will allow the general manager to answer these questions.
Thank you.
Chairman, yes, this incident was reported to the fraud squad immediately on discovery.
Right.
And the fraud squad have begun their investigations. Not sure if they have completed all that is required.
Okay. Now, in terms of Paria, I'm trying to follow up this transaction. Has an internal investigation been conducted by Paria as it relates to that unit within Paria that was hoodwinked? Because you had to be hoodwinked, whoever was in charge of that unit, to allow, for instance, some strange being or body writing you and telling you X. This is not the body that did the job, but somebody else contacted Paria and said, look, things have happened, send this money, not to the people who did the job, but to this new person. Who in Paria did that? And what action was taken to ensure that never occurs in terms of sanctions, in terms of penalties, and in terms of policy? Who was responsible, and did the company conduct an investigation into that matter? And was anyone held liable for this particular situation?
Chairman, let me state categorically that we had an investigation completed internal by Paria. The investigation identified a number of areas for improvement, including tightening of policies, including training for employees around fishing and the type of fishing activity that is possible to take place, including re-education of employees on the opportunities or the various type of mechanisms people could use to defraud the company. And these were shared broadly across the company with all employees. As you know, in the modern world today, phishing and computer fraud is critical, and we have invested our time in training and continuous reinforcement of methods in which people would try to defraud the company. Currently, we have a process in place called Know Before, where on a monthly basis, every employee receives training on possible opportunities that could occur through different type of electronic fraud. We feel that those measures have been successful in being able to mitigate the risk of future losses. Since we've had the event in 2022, we've had no further loss in Paria due to any of these type of incidents.
Any sanctions were, any disciplinary action was taken by Paria against?
We had discussions with the person involved. No disciplinary actions were taken specifically. However, that person was taken through extensive training on what to expect and what to look for with regards to possible opportunities that may come in the future, as well as the entire organization.
I'm not happy with that, but I'll pause at this time and ask Mr. Paria to go on, and then Hazel, and then Mr. Scotland.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on the same line of questioning that Chairman had concerning this $200,000 US. Just for my clarity, this particular incident was solely because of a cyber attack, phishing, that led to the series of events where this money went to somebody else's account, and then you have all the follow-up to get it back. It was primarily because of a cyber attack.
It was primarily because of a cyber attack due to phishing. Yes.
Okay, so in the financial transaction, there is two parties. There is the person who is sending the money, and there is somebody who is receiving the money. This cyber attack was against who? Was it Paria, or was it the bank who is accepting the instructions to put that money somewhere?
The cyber attack was against Paria.
Was against Paria?
Yes.
Okay, and in that investigation, now, my basic mind tells me as a private citizen, with phishing, it is me and the bank, and somehow I can see it happen because it's happened where individuals are scammed. But I want to ask, for a corporate organization like Paria, which I do not believe it is a one-man operation, where one man gives an instruction to send $200,000 US. And in this phishing, I find it hard to believe, like Chairman, that nobody they get locked up as yet for that. Because you are telling me that in an organization like yours, it was left up to one person who has this power of giving an instruction for 200,000, 1.3 billion TT dollars. And
$1.3 million TT dollars.
Sorry, yes, 1.3 million TT dollars. And that person has gotten, to me, according to what was said, a tap on the wrist and we will retrain you what not to do next time. I find that hard to accept as well. So if it is on the Paria side and you have a company on the other side that is to receive this money, and you have your procurement arrangement, you have all of these systems with banking where you have specific accounts for vendors. You're telling me there was no red flag from the banking side and say, look, this instruction that you are telling me to put it in Mr. X account, it doesn't match with the account we have on the records. Nobody from the banking side raised a red flag on that. So this is what I'm saying. I find it difficult to digest that explanation. I trust that when the report that is going to come to this committee, and when we read it, we may get additional information that perhaps you don't have the time to say here today. But I want to concur with the chairman that I find it very difficult to believe that this transaction happened and nobody on our side has been held to account. So far, you said that the fraud squad is still investigating, so we'll see where that goes. So I just wanted to add that little piece, and I saw there is a number of cyber tools and measures that have been put in place, a whole suite of them. I may have a couple of questions on those later on. But I just wanted to put that to go on the record. Mr. Chair, I have one question that I would like to start with on the financials.
Mr. Vice Chairman, if you just permit me to just comment on that point there.
Sure.
It was of interest to me in terms of the cyber training that takes place not only at Heritage, but in other organizations that I have some interest in, that they constantly send you emails with variations of the email addresses to test, to make sure that people read it very carefully, etc. And you will be amazed on a global scale how often it is that people don't realize that there is a slight change in the name, and this is how this phishing takes place. And so it is not unusual that circumstances arise where this occurs, but you can't necessarily vest the person who was the victim with any type of intent, unless it is that they had gone through the significant amount of training, which is what has happened now. So I would respectfully suggest, if there was a reoccurrence, that you would find a situation where you would be able to say to the individual involved, listen, we've given you a significant amount of training, we've trained you into what to look for, you failed to look for it, and therefore in those circumstances there needs to be a penalty. But I suspect that when this incident first occurred, we were not up to par insofar as the training is concerned to require that kind of penalty. But I just wanted to put that on the record.
Sure.
As well.
I'm fully aware fishing is a $1 trillion business today. I mean, every year there's over 2 to 3 million fishing transactions, according to the global arrangements. But my issue here, I mean, we have seniors here in every organization. Any one of you all authorized to issue $200,000 in one payment without going through a whole sequence of authorizations up and down and sideways? Just asking.
Well, I don't think I can do $10, but no, I would expect that, and I'd be quite happy to ask Mr. George to provide a more detailed report, because I suspect it would answer those questions.
And just to follow up again, Mr. Kwame, I've seen that you're on the floor. The personnel in that unit, when they were employed, they were underqualified or they didn't have the qualification? No. Because the reason why I'm asking this, cyber crime is an ongoing matter. Cyber crime in the world has been in existence before Petroleum was shut down and before we had this new formation called TPHL. Oh. So what I'm asking, what I'm trying to clarify, do you think that in hindsight, the personnel who occupied the unit that was hoodwinked, misled to issue with the authority of some senior personnel of TPHL, $200,000 to a fraudulent individual or organization or company. Would you say that on hindsight, training of that group of people within that unit would have been not addressed before these people occupied the offices?
But I think, respectfully, I think that is precisely what I was saying, is that it is evident that there must be ongoing training in relation to cybercrime because it evolves. And it is evident to me that that kind of training needs to, I think it goes on consistently in all the companies now on a repeated basis, because every month there's a new thing that you have to look out for. So I'm saying that, if the situation were to arise now again, and it was a issue that clearly they would receive training in relation to, and that person failed to implement what they had been taught, well then certainly I would think that I would expect a penalty would occur. But I don't think I would say that the people are underqualified. There probably was a lack of sufficient training or modernized training, and we've addressed that.
But what role as the chairman, you as the chairman of TPHL, who would have authorized? Would it be you? No. Would it be who in the organization would have finally authorized that payment to that fraudulent company amounting to $200,000? Who in the organization? Who? Because as Mr. Paria said, there ought to be checks and balances. And if I am the person who is on the desk, I cannot transact that kind of money without somebody else at a higher level. So the whole issue of checks and balances looked like it fell down to some extent. And what is even more amazing, and I say shocking, is that no action, no sanctions were imposed, even a temporary suspension. Nothing was done. In fact, the same people who conducted that transaction were kept on and they were trained.
But that is, I would find myself slow to speak to somebody like yourself about industrial relations, but the fact about it is that is an aspect of an outcome of an incident. So additional training is required.
Yes.
It would be difficult to punish somebody when they had insufficient training in the first place. So the fact that the outcome is the additional training, which in the circumstances of the situation may very well have been the most appropriate outcome. Otherwise, we would land ourselves somewhere else. Much obliged.
I pause and let Mr.
Yeah, thank you. So just final question on that issue. Being said that all has been said so far, and a report was filed, the fraud squad is looking at it. In the view of the board, based on what has happened, retraining and all the cybersecurity measures, is the board satisfied that there was no criminal action in this transaction that would have led to no criminal investigation in this matter so far?
Well,
are you happy that, it was an error because of phishing?
You recollect, it's with the TTPS at the moment, so they will be the ones that would have to determine.
So they will decide that. So that is not off the board at this time?
Not at all.
Okay, all right. So just quickly, if I were to just draw back your attention to the financials that you provided for 2019, there was a section under the qualified audit opinion, and it showed that in 2019, the auditors could not verify $309 million in expenses and $233 million in trade and other payables for Petrotrin due to missing documentation. All right, this was in 2019. The question that I have, and I know we're in 2024 now, and that would have come up somewhere in your accounting reports. Was those things addressed, and is that a problem that we are still having in terms of the accounting procedures, where you have expenses and payables and so on, where you have missing data, missing physical, paperwork that is continuing to hamper the progress of the organization.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Vice Chairman. Firstly, I would say that the court, because today was Heritage and Paria,
Yeah.
so we didn't bring the Petrotrin specific personnel. But the answer to your question is, violent, yes.
Yeah.
The answer, the fact about it is that the documentation to support claims from suppliers was missing prior to the transition or at the time of the transition. So we have situations where documents are being presented that don't match with the documentation that we have. So what happens is a supplier will come and say, here are my invoices, this is how much is owed to me. We would then, as best as we can, compare that with the documentation that Petrotrin has. And if that documentation doesn't match, there is then discussions between the two parties to try and get some sort of acceptable medium. And that has been the issue that has plagued us. So when PwC was there, PwC went through a verification exercise and pretty much came up with a sum to say that this would be what is due and owing to suppliers. And I suppose, I've experienced things more and more as I get on in life. And the fact about it is, one thing that always amazes me, how PwC disagrees with Ernst & Young and disagrees with the other. So they all never seem to gel. So the Ernst & Young have come in and said they're not too keen on that. So yes, absolutely, this is a problem that will continue to plague Petrotrin, and I will go on to say that in relation to that, that is why we are seeking advice at this point in time as to how to really, we just can't keep going on like this, so we need to put an end to it somehow.
Out of that Petrotrin experience, can you say that you are avoiding that at Heritage and Paria with specific programs?
It can't, yes, it can't happen at Heritage and Petrotrin, and it's not happening at Heritage and Paria. I think that transition from Petrotrin into Heritage was quick. Might have been. I can't think I can hide the fact that it was traumatic, and therefore it resulted in a lot of information not transferred from one entity to the next.
But carrying those type of figures which cannot be verified out of Petrotrin, and it's forming part of your holdings in terms of the consolidated report, would you agree that having those numbers as part of your consolidated report weakens your bottom line for the consolidation? Because if you can't say for surety that these are the numbers because we are missing data, how does that solidify or justify the holdings final report?
And that is part of the problem that we've been facing, which is holding back the consolidated. We've really, I think, tried our best to resolve it as equitably as possible, and that's why we're taking advice now as to how to draw a line in the sand and deal with it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have one more question before I pass on.
Sure.
Again, this has to do again with the data that was provided to us. Under this issue of the negative equity position of the holding report that shows $15.9 billion as of September 30th, 2019. This can be found on page 16 of that financial. So it is the financials that were submitted. This is
Right.
the holdings consolidated report, page 16, which shows a negative equity of $15.9 billion, which really tells the common man at the end of the day that, in 2019, because that is when you would have had your consolidation, that, the liabilities far exceed the assets of the holdings. And I suspect that is when you would have brought on the Guaracara assets and so on. My question is, coming into 2024, that negative value, because we haven't had any reports since then, so I can't tell whether there have been any improvement on that. Can you say whether we have seen some improvement in terms of that from an accounting perspective? Because if you are valuing, let's say, like the Guaracara assets inside there, and every year you have depreciation on that asset, every year that depreciates, that negative equity value goes up. What is the holding company doing? Because at the end of the day, that is on the liability side of the company. That is something that the taxpayer has to deal with some way down the road. And it was there in the report. So to me, it was a red flag for me. But not having the benefit of the follow-up financials, if you can give a little idea of what has happened since then to that negative equity value of $15.9 billion.
Because that's I didn't bring that's a TPHL type question. But let's see if we can raise the answer for you in the meantime.
No problem.
But
I probably can redefine the question and resend it back.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
We can certainly do that. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Chair.
I'm much obliged.
I'll pass on.
Okay, Hazel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There might be a little difficulty in the audience understanding why he's Mr. Paria and I'm Hazel. I don't know it's because you're very fond of me and that my name is twice as long as his. During the public meeting held on April 17, 2024, TPHL informed the committee that the Bank of Nova Scotia, located in Houston, Texas, was selected as the consultants to go through each bid and assist in their assessment. As of April 2024, there have been 8 expressions of interest for the purchase, lease, or restart of the refinery, with a process for receiving non-binding offers expected to conclude by May 10, 2024. Those are your words. Would you kindly give this committee an update on the status on the sale of the refinery?
But I do happen to have the expert here with me, so Mr. Mohammed will answer that question.
Very convenient.
Thanks. Thanks very much, committee. So prior to the May 10th, we received the number of non-binding offers, and we had an evaluation committee set up to begin the evaluation of these offers that came to us. Where we are today, and I think it has been made public knowledge, is that these 8 have now been shortlisted to 3. The evaluation committee is awaiting their final proposals, which are expected on the 27th of January. And meetings are planned with the evaluation committee for the 6th and 7th of February to review the final submissions by the 3 final offerers for the refinery.
If I may, Mrs. Thompson, that is. Can you identify the 3 companies that have been shortlisted for purposes of this committee and the public?
The 3 companies that have been shortlisted are Oando PLC, CRO.
Just repeat that slowly because.
Oando PLC, CRO, which is Kemetec, Rampisad, and Ocala, and INCA, INCA Limited, a US-based company.
You understand what he said? Yeah, got it. Spell that first one first.
Oando, Oando.
Oh.
Oando, sorry.
Oando. And what is it? The second one is what?
CRO. CRO.
Is the second one, and the third one?
The third one is INCA, INCA.
All right, thank you.
Those are all acronyms?
Those are the names of the companies, yes.
Crow and... All right. Now, at the April 17, 2024 meeting, public meeting, we learned that the refinery preservation costs of $6 million annually were incurred by Guaracara. To what extent is the sale of the refinery assets expected to earn enough money to offset these sums spent on annual preservation costs? Of course, if the preservation costs have gone down, you let us know as well.
The preservation course has continued. We've continued to preserve the refinery. And like every business venture, committee member, once successful, we expect that, we may see rewards to cover the cost of maintaining the refinery. But again, that will be subjected to pricing and the markets and what, how the progress of the refinery goes with regards to restart. But we remain optimistic that these costs could be recovered.
Madam Member, if I can interject to put my 2 cents in. I think that certainly for TPHL, but I mean, obviously, there are persons that occupy positions higher than that. But for TPHL, I think our priority really would be to get the refinery operational. And I mean, obviously, in so doing, with no further loss, and then we would seek to see what we can recover. But certainly at this stage, the priority is to get it operational with as little financial commitment from TPHL. We really can't commit it in any event, but we really would like to get the refinery operational and then seek to recover costs, if possible, later on. I would expect no less.
Just to follow up on what Mrs. Thompson, Hazel Thompson, raised with you, Mr. Kwamina. What is the difference between, or may I put it another way? What is the role of Scotia Capital as opposed to the evaluation committee? Can you identify clearly their functions, responsibilities? So who does what? So Scotia, for example, I'm going through, they identify the unsolicited people who are being attracted, so the 10 or 15, and then the evaluation committee will then go through those 10 or 15 and then determine, look, shortlist 3. Just explain to us.
So as I understand it, the expressions of interest would come into TPHL, and an advisor, Scotia is the advisor, so Scotia has all of the experience, so they will look at the financials, etc., and their ability to, in fact, perform, and they would render advice to both TPHL, and they also now render advice to the evaluation committee. So the evaluation committee is made up of members who come from different disciplines, and they would utilize their own knowledge, but Scotia Capital is there for the purposes of the financial aspect of it and their ability to assess whether somebody has demonstrated the capability to do what it is that we expect. So I would really categorize Scotia as advisors, and the evaluation committee does what you would expect an evaluation committee to do, which is conduct their evaluation. They're free to accept the advice or not accept the advice of Scotia.
Now, how was Scotia Capital selected? Was it a request for proposal? Was it a competitive bidding? Or was it a sole select arrangement?
One moment, I can't recollect that, but I said a competitive exercise.
So you had requests for proposals?
It must. Yes. Yes, please.
You had that, right?
Yes, please.
Can we get information on that? Can you provide that? In other words, if you had a competitive bidding, there's a process, right?
Yeah.
And that will be public. Yeah. And did that go on? Is it international, regional, and local?
Yeah,
or just confined to Trinidad?
The request for proposal for the advisor was an international tender. I do have the documents here, but that could be provided.
International tender. And that particular Scotia, are you aware, Mr. Kwamina, are you aware that this Scotia capital was recently fined by the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States for breaching the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission, whereby they were told that they have to record all transactions in writing with whoever contacts them, whoever they are servicing. But they were doing it through cell phone and WhatsApp, and that was in breach of the SEC regulations. And they were fined close to $750,000 US. That was just about 2 years ago. So I was just wondering if you're aware of this, and if this company is involved in fraud or in breaches, I should say, of the SEC regulations. Was TPHL aware of it? And if the TPHL was aware, what did it do before it selected this company that has been charged for breaching SEC regulations in the United States? Are you aware of it?
Thank you very much. Yes, we are aware of it, and we have received from the Houston office that we deal with, we received an explanation, and my recollection can't take me back to the points that were made, but that would have been subsequent to their selection. And insofar as their process and their interaction with us has been involved, it has been, in my respectful view, impeccable. And there is no opportunity for anything like what occurred in this related entity, I think it is, to happen in relation to this. So it's two separate relationships. So there's no opportunity for that. But we did ask for an explanation, and I did have sight to the explanation, and I'm satisfied that the relationship that we have and the entities that we deal with and the individuals that we deal with are not impacted by this particular incident. But I think we are very much aware of it. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Chairman, I believe you raised it publicly. And as a consequence of which we asked for the explanation.
Let me just ask another question. How much are they paid right now? How much are they paid? And how are they paid? Monthly, quarterly, every year, as the case may be?
Chairman, they are paid at a rate of 55,000 US a month.
55,000 US a month, right?
Yes.
And for how long now? How long is it? So, and they have been retained when, Mr. Kwamina?
We've been going through different stages. So I think in relation to this recent exercise, Mr. Mohammed would say from when?
That I can't remember. I can't call the exact date, but it would have been around February 2024.
February 2024. And they are still on your payroll?
They are still on our payroll, yes.
Right. And the final question before Mr. Scotland comes in. The final question I'd like to raise before Mr. Scotland comes in is this. Mr. Kwamina, to what extent, as chairman of TPHL, you believe that this body, Scotia Capital, is conducting proper research on the entities that they provide to you? And then when you have the shortlisting of these entities, down to the 3, as was provided to us by Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, we have been reading in the newspapers of the credentials of these organizations. And it causes me as chairman to be worried whether Scotia Capital is doing what I call the kind of analysis and detailed research so that when they are proposing or advising us to accept X, Y, or Z, they would have done the necessary homework. Are you convinced that they are doing and advising properly, given the fact that these three entities that have been shortlisted, questionable, suspicious activities have arisen concerning the bona fides of these entities?
Sure.
Are you worried?
Well, I may answer the question by first saying that I don't necessarily accept that questionable activities have been arisen in relation to the parties, but I will say it to you. If I could take your memory back to, I'm very careful with reputations, etc., but if I take your memory back to probably the second iteration of the exercise to identify a prospective purchaser, we went quite a long way with that prospective purchaser. And in going quite a long way with that prospective purchaser, Mr. Chairman, I would readily admit that Scotiabank was raising some flags, and I think I would even say, personally, I would say, well, listen, let's give them a little chance to come up with this information, etc. And the reason why they could go no further is it was established based on their concerns that they could go no further. And so far, entities that have not made it this far have had issues that Scotiabank has identified from pretty early as being concerning about their ability to finance, or one of the concerns that constantly arise is their ability to actually carry out the exercise at the end of the day. So far, I will tell you that I'm not concerned, and in addition to which, you'll be pleased to know that we do pay attention to what is being said in the public arena. So when individuals like yourself raise concerns, we certainly pass it on to Scotia and say, check it out for us to make sure that that is not a problem. And I have seen instances where, I mean, obviously, as you would expect with an exercise like this, there's a tremendous amount of lobbying. And I have seen exercises where some of the biggest mouths in terms of putting forward a proposal that Scotiabank has sat down and had discussions with their financiers in Spain, etc., and had discussions between themselves, and have come out and said, listen, this is not acceptable, and therefore we need to cut it short. And we tend to give them a little pushback and then accept their advice in relation to that. So we've had no difficulties so far.
Mr. Scotland, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think that my colleague, Mrs. Thompson, had a pressing question, but if that is not, so let me, Mr. Paria passed a question to me. Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the floor. Chairman George and Kwamina, I'm really not getting clarity from you all. Let me start first with the fishing exercise, Chairman. And Chairman, I must express my disappointment in both you as an experienced industrial relations expert and Mr. Kwamina. You had an issue with an employee, correct, in the fishing exercise? And you provided training for that employee so that it will not happen again, correct?
I'm not familiar. Was it one employee?
How many employees? But you provided training, yes? Mr. Mohammed, isn't that called progressive discipline? Isn't that a form of discipline where you try to ameliorate the situation by giving the employee the skill so it will not happen again? Isn't that an aspect of industrial relations called progressive discipline, which is a form of discipline?
I can't answer that specifically, but what...
It is certainly part of the process. I mean, I suppose if the employee received a letter, a disciplinary letter saying, we have a problem with what happened, and training is a consequence of that, well, then that would certainly be part of the...
And Chairman, I think that, but that is what the Chairman was getting to. But the public is not getting the clarity. The impression being created is that it was left undone and nothing was done. But from what you have said, it seems that the company has employed that remedy of progressive discipline And then you look to see if something like that occurs again, and then of course it escalates. So that's the first point. Secondly, when you were answering the chairman as it relates to the non-provision of the consolidated report, you spoke of a layered and intricate matter, yes? I'm asking, would you want to clarify that that layered and intricate issues dealt with, if it had concepts such as debt reconciliation, asset splitting, interaction with both foreign and local regulators, actual physical asset verification along with asset verification on paper, and also tax issues, which conjoined with COVID-19, are those, when you speak about layered and intricate matters, were those the matters that affected the time?
Those were certainly the matters that affected the time, but I'm prepared to say at this stage that we are at the question of those two academic matters that need to be resolved, otherwise we'll be completed. But there have been a proliferation of issues that have faced us because of the transition from these old entities to the new ones.
So you have gone through those other ticklish issues and you're now stuck on that last issue.
So we have those two academic issues, and then I would just also go back to Vice Chairman's question in relation to the suppliers. That remains very much a niggling issue for Petroleum.
And you've undertaken by the end of the first quarter in 2025 that those issues ought to be dealt with.
Then, having regard to your chairman, I use the word undertaking very carefully now.
So how would you want to? Would you want to revise the? I
would respectfully suggest that is the period with which we wish to have. But joking aside, this has to come to an end, and I expect this to come to an end during the course of this year, for sure.
Chairman, so the answer is revised. Now let me go to more direct issues after I've clarified. For heritage, can you provide an update on the progress of the new strategic plan 2024 to 2030 being developed with the assistance of Ernst & Young, the auditors?
Well, finally, Mr. Scotland, I get the opportunity to ask the CEO to answer that question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So the update for the strategic plan from 2024 to 2030, we revised that timeline 2025 to 2030 because we completed it in July of 2024, which set us up for the fiscal year 2025. That work has now been completed and is in the implementation phase. We took it to the board in July, began implementation in September, after September 30th, as we embarked on our 2025 plans. It's really about what Heritage can do in order to grow production from now until 2030, being our key focus on trying to deliver up to 60,000 barrels a day per Minister Young's challenge, 60,000 barrels a day by 2030.
But why has Heritage decided to do it 2024, now 2025 to 2030, when there's already a plan covering 2021 to 2030?
So following 2021, there are ongoing impacts of COVID-19 dramatically influenced the ability of the organization to deliver 2021 through 2023. So we revised that strategic plan. Furthermore, as we learn more about our assets and matured as an organization, we saw areas that we thought we could adjust that 2021 to 2030 plan as I came in.
Chairman, through you, I want to address this to Paria, especially trade receivables. As at the 30th of September 2019, the company's gross trade debts were significant. Can you identify if there are any measures in place to improve Paria's credit risk management processes and the recovery of trade receivables, we being now in 2025?
Chairman, let me direct that question to our finance.
Morning again, committee. So we have taken several steps within the accounts receivable department.
Yes.
We send out monthly statements, we do follow-up calls, we liaise with the legal department, commercial operations to ensure collections on a timely basis. We review and negotiate credit terms with all our key customers. So far, it has been working because our overdue is less than 0.1% for non-government organizations.
For non-government organizations. Tell us the aspect of government organizations then.
Our main local customers are NP, Unitec, and Captain.
Yes.
And we have no issue collection from Captain and Unitec, but we do have working with NP terms of a payment plan for outstanding collections.
Chairman, through you, the logistics hiring function, the trucking transport review for the period 2021-2022, in the audit report submitted to us, in 2018, Heritage established a short-term arrangement with contractors for trucking services, and in 2020, an invitation to tender was issued and letters of award were granted to 4 contractors in 2021. Chairman, it could be me, but bear with me. Letters of award, however, were issued to the following contractors: Dumore Enterprising Limited, Lang Sandblasting and Painted Company Limited, Quinteller Sales and Services Limited, R. ParlView Singh Services Limited, and S&D Construction Limited. Is it 4 or is it 5? I've checked 5, and you said letters of award were given to 4. Which one is it, or was that an error?
I'll have to go back and look at the specific page that you're referencing and be able to reply to that.
Hold on, let me find it as we are here. The summary of the audit report under the heading IR 05-2022, subheading Logistics Hiring Function, Trucking Transport. So, review for the period January 2021 to June 2022, because, Chairman, now that we have the procurement, it may be something that needs to be addressed, that you said letters of award were granted to 4, but I have checked and identified 5.
Mr. Scotland, can we ask that we respond to that in writing?
We would be grateful, Chairman, through you.
Yeah.
And finally, Chairman, on this round, if I can address the issue of assets held for sale for Paria. It is noted that there were assets held for sale by Paria. Can you indicate the criteria used to classify property, plant, equipment, and inventories as assets held for sale as of September 2019, but particularly now as we approach a legal framework which involves procurement legislation?
Let me ask my finance lead to answer that question, please.
Yes.
Then, committee. So in 2019, because of the pending sale of the refinery, of which Paria was tied also to that sale, the auditors under the specific accounting standard treated the assets as a held for sale. So the accounts were done, were prepared as an asset held for sale for Paria. Since then, because of the time lapse, in 2022, based on not meeting all the financial accounting criteria, the accounts were prepared now as a going concern. So Paria operates its account is published as a going concern transaction.
So then, this asset held for sale, that nomenclature is not correct. It has to change now. as ongoing. It has changed.
Correct, yes.
19, I know. So as now, if we see the same asset, they'll be under the rubric ongoing. Thank you. Chairman, I would.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Scotland. I now invite my colleague, Mr. McClatchy, to take the floor.
Hi, good morning. I would like to shift gears a little. We've been speaking about a number of accounting issues all morning, but I'd like to, under the rubric of property, plant, and equipment, recently we had a failure of a rig in the heritage area. And I was just thinking, as part of the risk management and the exposure on the OSH side, that these property, plant, and equipment in all companies are very old. And at the moment, there is a risk with rust undercoating and a number of other things that might impact the issue of OSH and so on, and health and safety. Please allow me the liberty, based on those incidents, to ask what, in particular on the heritage side, what kind of assessment is being done and what kinds of works in that general sense is being planned for those aging assets, because we could be in some very different conversations in the future if, notwithstanding, we take care of the accounting part, but we need to also look at the risk involved in your plant, property, and equipment with regard to safety and repair and upgrade.
Before I ask the CEO to give you a detailed answer to that, I'll just say that that particular asset is not owned by Heritage.
Yeah, I know it's not owned,
right? But I'll ask him to.
Yeah, so thank you. So asset integrity remains a key focus for Heritage Petroleum. It has since its inception, but we have continued to increase the amount of capital and OPEX that we put towards it, given those aging assets. Our goal is, through our asset integrity management system, to refresh and renew those assets that need it over the next 3 years. Our spend has actually increased sixfold since inception. So from 2019 to now, we've increased that spending about 6 times, noting that we've continued to see asset integrity issues. We've also formulated several 3-year agreements in terms of our infrastructure renewal, as well as our inspection programs, to ensure that we are inspecting those assets and improving the ones and renewing the ones that need that attention most immediately. That's in terms of the overall structure. We also have several pipeline replacement and renewal programs, both onshore and offshore, and that's both with our offshore business unit, our midstream business unit, and our land business unit. But as you note, they are aging fields, and so this will be an ongoing piece of work for us. But we are getting to a more managed state, given the neglect that we had experienced over the past few decades. We're now getting on top of that. So some of the key lines that have leaked multiple times offshore are in the midst of being replaced right now as we speak. So we're getting behind it. We've increased the spending and continue to do our inspection programs to ensure that we can be more proactive than reactive in the future.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yeah. All right, here's Mrs. Hazel Thompson-Nahi, please.
Paria, you had listed a number of assets held for sale. What criteria were used to classify the property, plant, and equipment, as well as the inventories, as assets held for sale as of September 30, 2019? And tell us, have these assets been sold? If yes, when were these assets sold, and what was the sum earned from each sale? And if no, what is the expected timeline for the sale of the assets classified as held for sale as of September 30, 2019? Got it all?
Yes, sir.
Hi. With regard to the 2019 accounts, as mentioned, because Paria was being treated as part of the sale of the refinery, under the accounting standards, the assets owned by Paria were treated and accounted for as an asset held for sale, not necessarily being sold by Paria individually, but as part of the sale of Paria with the refinery. Since then, the accounting treatment has changed because it's been determined that it could not meet the criteria under the accounting standards as still being held for sale after three years. So it has been classified now as a going concern, meaning that the accounts are prepared as a going concern and the assets are no longer held for sale as part of that initial refinery sale.
Just, Madam, yes, yeah,
No
Madam
sale.
Member, if I could just
Yes. All right.
make it more of a layman for me, because
Yes,
I'm not
Mr.
an
Commoner.
accountant.
Step into the
Yes, which I'm not an accountant. The fact about it is that I think the initial thought process for the refinery was that it would encompass the Paria assets. So you buy the refinery and you have the port and you send everything. So I think that was the initial thought process. And I have to say, somewhat jealously in relation to Mr. George, that Paria has really turned out to be quite self-sufficient and quite a success. So therefore, I think the government has, what do you say, you get a catabol, they take it back now. So it's no longer part of the offer. So the Paria will remain in, and the refinery will go by itself. And I think I had mentioned on the last occasion that is also one of the issues that we face that has us a little bit in limbo in relation to the consolidation of these financials and dealing with the group, is that we now have to sort of determine how to deal with Paria as part of the group. And then when the refinery goes, that's now gone. So the group is developing. But short answer to the question is that at that point in time, it was supposed to be as part of the refinery, so that's why it was assets held for sale, but that's no longer the case. Thank you.
Yes.
The environment, and this is for both Paria, but particularly Heritage, because what plans are in place by both Paria and Heritage to work in consonance with preserving the environment whilst conducting your business? Is that part of your strategic plan in going forward 2024, 2025? And if not, when do you intend to present something to this committee? Say, look, apart from our operations or included in our operations, are these concerns as it relates to the environment and the protection of the environment?
Yeah, thank you. So this is actually critical to our strategic plan that we've just developed and has been really since the inception of Heritage. So first and foremost, it comes back to the question in terms of asset integrity. We need to be more proactive to prevent leaks rather than reacting to them once they happen. And we have our plans in place to do that, as I mentioned in my earlier response. Secondly, we have multiple programs that are really focused on how do we reduce our emissions. The long-term sustainability for even oil and gas companies still depends on us doing a good job with our emissions. So we have multiple projects where we are reducing the amount of methane that goes into the atmosphere and trying to utilize that gas then for whether that's for fuel or to put back into the grid. Furthermore, we have multiple initiatives that we work with the communities, whether that's replanting trees, our support of the Wildfowl Trust, multiple areas of bioremediation in terms of old sites that we inherited from the legacy company that we can then improve and really bring back to pristine environmental areas. So it's critical to our success, partnering with the communities, but also just in terms of our long-term sustainability, in terms of our use of gas, and then our involvement in carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, whether that's using CO2 for EOR or finding ways to receive that CO2 from the downstream side and put that into reservoirs so that we can pull CO2 out of the atmosphere.
And for the elephant in the room, and we are live, so I prefer, Chairman, through to ask for it in writing. Could you give this committee a report, not now, as to the circumstances leading to the Rig 10 incident and the actions taken to ensure safety of personnel and the environment?
Yes, I would say in due time. It's very early. We have not even been able to access the rig yet in order to determine what the root cause may have been, and that's because the rig is currently unstable and would be unsafe to board. And so at this time, OSH is beginning their investigation. We are working on supplying the documentation that they have required, and we will obviously conduct our own investigation, as will, I expect, multiple other entities. As soon as we have that information, then it's appropriate for us to supply to the committee.
Well, we would need that, Chairman, as a matter of urgency, because that is very current. I know we were looking at 2019, but you didn't expect to come here and not be asked about that. And finally, Mr. Chairman, what was the findings of your health and safety and your environmental department as it relates to the hydrocarbon sightings near Cedrus in October 2024?
So in October 2024, which was one of the spills that ended up in Cedrus, we did not find the source of that particular leak. It is no longer ongoing, but we did clean up everything that we found.
I am not understanding, not finding the source.
So
Coroner, would you want to?
No, I think Mr. Castillo.
You're leaving him here?
Yeah.
I don't, if there's any mission, they must have a source.
So yes, obviously there must be a source. The exact source was not identified because it was not an ongoing pipeline leak. It could have been an overflow event that was undetected because none of our platforms are manned 24 hours. And so if there was an overflow event that went undetected, it's possible that that was the source, but we have not identified the exact source of that event.
Have you been training your staff and providing resources to them to enable your staff to both do risk management and environmental risk management at both at both Heritage and Paria? Have you been training your staff in that regard?
Yeah, so to follow on from the previous questions, we have an extensive competency assessment that we evaluate the workers against. That includes both their ability from a technical standpoint, but then also in our HSE standards and making sure that we understand not only how to do the work, but to do it safely and in a way that protects the environment.
Chairman? Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Paria.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know the accounting part is the sexy part of this conversation. The assets held for sale in 2019 was $4.42 billion as far as the consolidated report. You've now said that asset for sale would have been Paria and the Guacara asset at that time. Is that correct? That $4.42 billion that is in that, would that be for both organizations at that time in 2019?
Yes, that would have been for both GRC and Paria at that time.
So today, and perhaps if you have that figure, because I know this is a number that would carry on in terms of the accounting, that asset for sale value, what is it today with only the Guaracara component inside it, because Paria has now been removed?
I don't have that information currently. We'll have to get that from Guaracara in terms of the evaluation as of current.
Can we safely say that whatever that value is today, whether it's in the 2023 or 2024 reports, that would be the base value that we may be looking for in terms of the sale of the asset?
I don't think so. I wish, but I don't think so, Mr. Vice Chairman. The fact about it is that what we are going to encounter with this prospective sale is the prospective purchaser saying, listen, if I have to come in here, I'm going to have to spend a significant amount of money to get this thing up and running and so forth. So you're going to have to equate that with what the value is and the cost of starting up, etc. So I think, speaking for myself, I think that really the best case scenario is a purchaser that could come in and efficiently get the refinery up and running, and then we yield the benefit from it as it becomes operational. I think that that I suspect maybe where we land up, but I'm being very speculative. But the fact about it is that I don't think that the value that you see there is going to be what we can look forward to somebody writing a check for.
I agree. And to follow that up, and I'm trying to understand a bit of the rationale in terms of splitting Paria out, because I am going to purchase this refinery, but to get the product in and out of my facility, I need to have a port, I need to have a pipeline, I need to have tank farms. So we've taken out Paria out of that, so we're telling a prospective buyer that, look, there is another component of a cost to your operation, because Paria is not going to do that for the refiner for free. What would have been the rationale for taking that asset out of the? Because to me, it seems like a better package for sale.
I think it's 100% a better package, and a lot of time has been spent at the outset. Later on in the process, we would actually be very clear that Paria is not part of the deal, and people will put in proposals with Paria included in the deal. And in fact, I will tell you, there were some prospective persons that actually you could tell that they were really after Paria and not the refinery. But the point about it is that the Heritage has put, along with Paria, advisors to that evaluation committee. And the reason for that is that whoever the prospective purchaser for the refinery is going to get very preferential terms in terms of access to the Paria port. And one of the issues that we had to make sure is that that doesn't affect Heritage's exports through the port. So that aspect is being managed very carefully. But the fact about it is that Paria has become quite an important asset for the state. So I think that is the reason why it has been carved out.
Just a segue, right? In terms of in 2019, again, because we have to ground the questions based on the data that we have. In 2019, one taking a bird's eye view of the operational losses of the refinery and so on, and that liability that was coming into the consolidated reports. In 2019, Heritage, in terms of its operation, at that point in time, it may have been a stretch to see the production at that time in terms of being profitable enough to deal with these losses or to cover it in the accounting. The question that I have is, has that changed over the last 4 years, stating that Heritage is comfortably managing getting rid of some of that overall debt that would have been incurred by Petrotrin over the years? Has that changed over the last couple of years?
You introduced the word comfortably, and I think that is probably where we would part. I think it's a very, very difficult exercise. For Heritage does quite well financially, but having done well financially, it has to deal with significant operational costs. It has to deal with all of these asset issues as well, which is also costly. And then it has to pay these bullet point payments to the debt. That continues to be a significant burden for the company, and so that is why the emphasis is being placed on. I mean, we certainly have to increase production so that we can meet these costs in a much better way. But we are also looking at refinancing again, so that we could bring the interests and so forth associated with these debts down to certainly more manageable levels. But I think that that debt will be a burden that Heritage will have to carry, and not a comfortable burden for some time.
So I have two questions before I just finish. Two quick questions. Has there been any requests for proposals to any companies to look at an option of putting back the Guaracara asset into continued preservation mode? Or we're just looking, the three companies that you have identified, are they for the purchase and operationalization of the refinery?
Sure.
Or there have been conversations about further preservation going forward?
There is a company in place that deals with the preservation at this point in time, and that company continues to do so. Right? So I don't think that that has been revisited in any way. That company continues to do the preservation because, unfortunately, Mr. Vice Chairman, we live in constant optimism that next week is going to be gone. So the fact about it is that so those three companies that we identified, those companies are coming in to purchase and operate the refinery, not to keep it in preservation.
So whoever has been doing the preservation so far, they continue
Yes.
in that annual $6 million TT dollars or thereabout cost for preservation. Yes. All right. The last question I have, Mr. Chairman, it comes off what MP Scotland had asked concerning the environmental issues. And I know in terms of the strategic plan going to 2030, I am aware of the ministries, Mrs. Bradshaw's ministry has a very wonderful, I think, strategic decarbonization plan for Trinidad and Tobago in terms of getting, in line with global requirements. Has Heritage plans in terms of its, and you spoke about, taking emissions and burying it in some old wells and so on. Has that been taken into consideration where the government's and the ministry's vision for that whole issue around decarbonization? Is it anchored on that, and how much of it is anchored on that?
Yeah, thank you. So we originally aligned with the Paris deal, just like Trinidad did, 30% reduction by 2030. Now, our primary emission is methane right now, so we targeted a 30% reduction of methane emissions by 2030. We've identified 3 projects that reduce most of that. One is in execution, one has been executed, one more is in execution. So we have updated our personal or heritage goal to be a 30% reduction in methane emissions by 2026, because we think we've got line of sight to do that. So that puts us well in line with the ministry's goals. Further, we are looking at our carbon intensity emissions, because as we grow production, we need to make sure now that we look at carbon intensity, and we're looking at a 40% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030. So that's, again, well in line with what the ministry has outlined, and we do that in partnership with them, whether that's through CCUS or other projects as we work to green our operations.
In terms of the cost that is going to be required to execute those things, knowing that we're in an era of very low margins in terms of the energy sector, any specific area that you think in that whole rollout that will allow Heritage to continue to perform? I know Chairman don't like the word comfortably, but in order to be able to maximize and continue paying this debt that has been saddled on the taxpayer. And I know that's a costly exercise in terms of the decarbonization and so on. Any particular strategy that you think that you're looking at in terms of being able to do both, deliver on the commitment of remaining profitable, yet looking after this huge HSE requirement globally that is, we're being called upon to be part of?
Yeah, so no, it's like you sit in our leadership team meetings. So that's exactly the kind of conversation we have, is that we target projects that not only help with the reduction of the carbon emissions, and in our case, mostly methane emissions, but that also bring value back to the company. So as we capture that methane rather than vent it, we will utilize it for our operations, whether that's to increase gas lift, use it for fuel gas, or send it back to Trinidad and Tobago to be used for the petrochemical industry or electricity. So the projects that we have identified are exactly about capturing it and utilizing it so that we not only reduce our emissions, but we gain value from it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions that I'd like to put to the team before I ask colleagues to come in again. This is a question from the public, Mr. Kwamina, because the public have a right. This is their business that we are engaged in. And the question that they are seeking clarification on from your good self or anyone you would like to designate to respond. Does TPHL have a policy that guides its subsidiaries with respect to the maintaining, yes, I think the maintaining of inventory and assets registers and the frequency of counts? That is the question that the public, a member of the public, has asked us to ask.
Very kind, Mr. Chairman. I can say TPHL, the answer to that question is no, but Heritage and Paria certainly, as the going concerns, have them, so I'd ask the CEO to let you know about that policy.
Sorry, Chairman. We have systems in place. Our biggest inventory really is our fuel stock, and there are approved procedures for having that inventory checked and verified on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annual basis. There are clear procedures around that check. And as far as materials inventory is concerned, we are just at the point where we are starting to build our material inventory, which is spares, etc., and those procedures are being put in place.
Oh, that is Paria, Mr. Kwamina?
That's Paria, sorry.
Right. What about Heritage?
Yes, and for Heritage, certainly in terms of our materials and supplies, inventory of tubulars, our warehouses, we instituted monthly counts beginning in 2024 that also culminate in a final annual account that verifies what are those variances. We had 0 variances for fiscal year 2024. Obviously, in terms of our production, we have various tank farms, meters. We do automatic and manual tank gauging, and then, of course, we reconcile those numbers as we go into the tank farm at Paria with them.
Okay. Mr. Kwamina, I know that it has been public knowledge that the former Petrotrin workers have been protesting. I think they were in front of Republic Bank some time ago. And one of the concerns that I'd like to seek some clarification on coming out of that deals with the pension plan for these former Petrotrin employees. Can you indicate to this committee whether, in accordance with the actuary's 2022 report, Bacon, Woodrow, and D'Souza, that Petrotrin Legacy should inject monies into the Petrotrin employees' pension plan? Do you know if, and that report would have been submitted in 2022 by Bacon, Woodrow, and D'Souza? Can you tell this committee, as chairman of TPHL, of which Petrotrin Legacy is a subsidiary, has this been taking place? The injecting of monies into the pension plan for the employees of former Petrotrin?
As far, I'm subject to being corrected by Sinanan Singh behind me. As far as I know, there is no current injecting of any funds into the pension plan. And as far as I am informed, the pension plan will not be affected until I think it's about 2046 or something to that effect. And at that point, and currently, the ministry is reviewing those reports in order to determine how to address that concern when it arises, but certainly not waiting till 2046, but they are looking at that at this point in time. So, yeah. So there's no current injection. Certainly, none of the group can afford to do any injection at this point in time. There's no impending danger to the pension plan by any stretch of the imagination. But a concern could arise, I think, as late as 2046, and that has been put before the ministry, and the experts and the technocrats are looking at that to see how that is to be resolved. But if at presently advised, if that requires some kind of injection at some point in time, that would certainly have to come from the government and not from the entities.
Now, do you have an idea what is the current value of the
It's significant.
Petrotrin?
I'll have to let you know, but it is significant. It's very large, yes.
Now, are you saying, and this recommendation, are you aware of the report?
Yes, yes.
And is there any concern that if an actuary report recommends, I mean, it's a recommendation to the Petrotrin legacy that we should have these injection of monies into this pension plan for the workers, and you are not honoring that, isn't that going to impact on the stability of this plan in the future?
Sure.
I know that you're talking about 2046, but if you don't have a regular injection and it has not been taking place, do you not anticipate some challenges?
Sure. There's no, it's certainly not being ignored, and it's certainly a very significant issue that is being addressed between the Ministry of Finance and the Petrotrin in relation to this issue. And so absolutely, if the report is, and I think what has happened is that the report has come in, and the report was checked by the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance has concurred with some of the findings in relation to it. So that aspect is being explored. But I think everybody can recognize at this stage that the funds, they're not funds available on a national scale to put that kind of injection at this point in time. But it is certainly a very pressing matter for Petrotrin, and we are looking at it. But we are conscious of the issue.
Is that report private, secret, and confidential?
I can't answer that. I'll have to check to see. I'm not
The
aware.
Baton Woodrow and the Sousa report.
I'm not aware as to its.
Can you inquire
Absolutely.
as to whether a report can be made available to our committee?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Now, the other issue I wanted to ask Mr. Kwamina, the lease operators that would be engaged by Air Heritage to provide, or to supply, I should say, crude oil. Are these operators paid in TT dollars, or are they paid in US dollars when they supply crude to Heritage?
TT dollars.
Or they are paid in TT dollars? Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Now, I just want to refer you to what is called the internal audit report, right? And it is dated, I think, the 13th of September, if I'm not mistaken. It is the 13th of September, 2022. So just, if you could just follow that for me, that is the officials and my colleagues here. Now, Heritage, according to the information we have coming out of that internal audit report, dated 13th of September 2022, retained the services of Kenson Production Services Limited. And I think there's a shortened version of this company. It's called Kenson. to provide manpower services, mainly to support the operations of what you call land business unit, midstream business unit, offshore business unit. The resources provided to support these business units were assigned mostly to the operations and maintenance functions. And the disciplines included, but are not limited to, production leads, operators and technicians, crude storage operators, mechanical, civil, electrical, pipeline, dispatchers, etc. However, an agreement was formalized from January of 2020 for a duration of 3 years, providing fixed labor over the contractor for the heritage operations. Now, this decision, or the decision was taken rather, to include the provision of contingent labor, that is labor provided for a short-term period within the project for specialized discipline, among other things. Now, I don't want to detain you too long because based on your own submission, that is the internal audit report, they provided a series of areas, for example, for consideration. Employees assigned to heritage do not have a minimum qualifications and experience required. These are the findings from this report. Changes to key personnel not communicated to heritage and approval sought. Another finding was employees were not seen on the job or work rosters for their respective invoice periods, as well as the employee master list. Another finding was no evidence of performance appraisals were submitted for 46 or 64% of employees. That's a huge amount, Mr. Kwamina. And another finding was no clear guidance regarding the frequency of PPE issuance. Now, as I said, these are matters that came out of the internal audit report. There is also the issues related to Kenson establishing a safe culture for employees, including employees being aware of a key safety policies. There is no evidence of contracted employees attending heritage induction. And finally, inaccurate invoices submitted to heritage. Now, it seems, Mr. Kwamina, that in 2019, and based on this internal audit report, 13th of September 2022, there was a free-for all taking place with this particular contractor, as outlined by the internal audit report. Now, I have some questions. I have some concerns as well. But the questions I would like to ask your good self and anyone else you would like to assign to respond are as follows. Given that Heritage had a 3-year contract with Kenson Production Services Limited starting in January of 2020, and it is to be assumed that the contract would have ended in 2023. Am I right, Mr. Kwamina? Right. Did Heritage engage this said company for similar services beyond 2023? Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
I'm asking, having regard to the internal auditor's findings on the free for all taking place with this company under the control of Heritage. I'm asking the question whether the contract, which ended according to Mr. Kwamina at the end of 2023, did Heritage re-engage this same company for similar services subsequent to the contract coming to an end in 2023? That is the question.
Yes, so the first thing that I'd like to clarify is that the initial contract came to an end in 2023. However, we did an extension while we went to market to rebid that contract. Kenson was the successful awardee after that. In regards to the free-for-all, as you phrased it, we don't see it that way. While there were findings, we worked very closely with Kenson to close those findings during that initial contract period. As a result, from that extension and then their successful award, we believe they have closed those findings successfully.
So, are you saying that the auditor or the auditors' findings of severe shortcomings of this particular organization, and I hold no brief for any organization, there was an award, you are saying, Mr. CEO, subsequent to these very troubling findings, and you are saying that the said company, Kenson Production Services Limited, was successful, am I right?
Yes, they were
and
successful
could you tell
in
us
that.
for what period of time?
For another 3-year period.
Another 3-year period. And how was this contract awarded? Was it through competitive
We went
bidding?
through a competitive tender.
And that was when, sir? When did it take place?
So the award was given in, if I remember correctly, October 1st. Could have been September, but of 2024. So we supplied an extension to go through that tendering process, and the award was in September, I believe.
Okay. Now, and this is your issue of compliance, eh? And we are seeking. Now, during this compliance review, because you said that you had some review there, within the contract period, how did Heritage monitor this company's, I think Kenson's, progress in addressing the gaps, implementing the recommendation?
So we had regular meetings, both our audit team and our line business units had regular meetings to check progress against those audit findings, so that as those recommendations were implemented, we could confirm that they were successfully implemented.
Do you have reports to support what you have just submitted to this committee?
I can go back and check to see if there are meeting minutes to that effect.
No. Listen, this is a compliance contract which has been breached. internal reports from the auditor and their findings were very troubling. You are saying to this committee that it was reviewed, and not only was it reviewed, but the company, through an award of a public competitive tendering process, won another round and was extended the period for 3 years. Okay, that's what I'm understanding. Did the company in its review prepare a report during the period of monitoring so that when it issued this competitive round to award another contract, you had a report that you would have had in your possession guiding you as to the performance of this company? Do you have a report that you are conscious of that you can make available to this committee?
Yeah, so during our evaluation period, we would have tabulated how they performed against our our technical evaluation, our HSE evaluation, and financial evaluation. So that is certainly part of the evaluation process in a competitive tender.
No.
But if I just answer.
Before, the internal findings reveal that there were not only unqualified manpower in terms of personnel, but there were underqualified personnel that were hired and were paid. And there were gaps between live bodies and the invoices that were submitted, that were paid. So we have a situation where, for example, the company says I'm providing 100 employees, they are qualified. But the actual amount of employees who were supplied were 50. And they were underqualified, and they were unqualified, and they were paid. What did the company do to recover these losses? Because this is taxpayers' money. Heritage paid for work, Mr. Kwamina, according to the internal auditor, that was never done. So we would like to know, how did Heritage address this so that at least losses that were, in fact, Heritage would have been misled. Heritage would have been misled by this company. And Heritage, having been misled, paid for services that was never provided by this company. How did you recover those losses to the extent that you had another round of competitive bidding and this company was successful in coming back for another 3 years? So what happened to all those challenges, difficulties, shortcomings that we experienced as a company? Because because I'm part owner, I'm a shareholder of that company. So we need to get some answers and some clarification at the same time so that the public will know how Heritage is handling our business.
I'll respond in the following way. Firstly, I will say that if there is any documentation that can answer your question, we will certainly supply that. Secondly, this is the largest contract that Heritage has. I think it supplies some 600 workers to the organization. So I have to say, regrettably, that any contract of that size, supplying 600 workers in a manner in which is going to have issues. They are going to have issues where the company would have expected that 10 people might have turned up, 5 didn't. And so on both sides, we found as a board that they had issues, with probably Kenson not monitoring what was happening properly, and as well, Heritage not monitoring what is happening properly. I think that the committee should find great comfort in the fact that that there was an open procurement process done properly that went through a process where they would have taken into consideration previous concerns, and at the end of the day, Kenson came out on top. And it can't be the case that you go through a process, a proper process, where you do this evaluation, and obviously those people that conducted the process, and as you know now, procurement is very technical with all sorts of different levels, and that does not include the board, come to this conclusion in relation to the fact that that Kenson is ought to be awarded the contract. And I can tell you from my personal recollection and interaction with this thing, that the performance of Kenson under the previous contract was something that had come to the board. In some of these concerns, we had the benefit of that report that you saw, etc. And I know, I'm surprised to see you didn't mention it, but I know that he, the Chief Operations Officer, and himself have been personally interacting with Kenson to ensure that, and I categorize this as a monitoring issue, that all of these things are properly monitored so that we ensure that there's no reoccurrence. And I am confident, although I don't have the facts, but I will get it, that if there was any shortfall insofar as, or loss insofar as funds of concern, that has been rectified. But I will get that information for you.
Yeah, so part of our invoice reconciliation process recovers those funds. I think further to the question regarding competency, that was the primary work that we did as part of the bid process. Once they were awarded the successful contract, every job description, every member that was brought to our team was validated by every line leader. So the learnings from this first process was incorporated into our award to ensure competency going forward. I'll have to go get that number for you. Not in front of me, no. Yes.
Just repeat myself. I'm very disappointed that a very powerful company like this one, Heritage, important company, and I'm assuming, not admitting, that you may not have had a report coming out of the internal findings of the auditor to tell this committee or to share with this committee what were the losses arising to the company, to TPHL, to the taxpayers as a result of these deficiencies, these shortcomings, these weaknesses in the internal controls of Heritage. And therefore, how are you going to ensure with this new contract for another 3 years, we don't have a recurrence or repeat of that in whatever form and in whatever way? So I am assuming, I may be wrong, but you can correct me. Is there a report in your possession as Heritage that would have detailed the losses that was incurred or were incurred by Heritage as a result of these discrepancies, these shortcomings during the 3-year cycle? How much it was? There ought to have been some serious analysis, I'm assuming.
there's
So
no-
I don't know if you could advise us
There's
on
no
that.
doubt, Mr. Chairman, and without fear of contradiction, there's no doubt that there has been detailed analysis of the previous performance of Kenson prior to the award of this new contract. There is no doubt that, and as the CEO said, it would have been invoice reconciliation that would have turned up some of these issues that you saw there. And every aspect of the concerns that would have been arisen during the first 3-year contract would have been addressed in relation to the issuance of this new contract. And you would have heard one of the things that they went through in a very detailed manner was job descriptions and analysis for each of the components of each rule insofar as the Kenson project is concerned. And I would say, Mr. Chairman, and I really want to say as kindly as possible, certainly if we were provided with some very detailed questions. If we had known that you would have wanted to see some sort of report to establish that aspect of it, we certainly would have come with it today. So we will certainly, it might involve us doing a synopsis of the various aspects, but I am confident that you will be able to get a report as to how these issues were addressed and so forth.
Yeah, as I said, I have no brief for nobody.
Understand. I would never.
I own no brief for anyone. All I'm concerned about on behalf of the committee and the taxpayers of TNT is to ensure that we have value, especially at a time when we have a crisis of cash. We have no money. We broke. So we cannot continue to allow these things to go in the way that it is going. And I'm hoping, Mr. Kwamina, and I'm happy that you did, in fact, indicate to us that you will look into it and supply this committee with a report as to what were the losses that we incurred as a result of these deficiencies and these shortcomings. And we look forward to your consolidated reports for 20, 21, 22. And we just hope that we don't have a repetition of what we are experiencing or we experienced. Okay, so I would say unless my colleagues, Mr. Scotland. Yes.
I know we've gone into
Yes, no
time,
problem,
but
no problem.
just to
We could go until 3 o'clock.
word,
No problem.
a word.
Yeah.
I would just throw that out there. I know that we wouldn't advise yourself, but Chairman, we hold a brief for the taxpayers.
Yes.
And if there's an issue relative to the performance or monies owed by any contractor who was presently engaged, I'm sure that you all will be aware of the set-off principle. And I hope that when you come back to us, you would bear that in mind, so that if there's any losses have been incurred, we can certainly set that off and recoup any monies that were legitimately lost on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And I just want to reiterate again, my peripheral knowledge of this issue would have been that invoices would have been submitted saying 80 workers, X amount. And when we would have done the reconciliation, we would have said, no, it's 60 workers, X. So we would not have paid an 80 worker invoice.
You would have paid the 60
we would have
workers
paid
invoice.
what our records reflect is the issue. All of this comes about as a consequence of reconciliation.
Understood.
So that would have been, so I'm not too sure that there are losses, etc., but we will check
And
them.
clarify it for us when you give us the
And I
report,
can-
please.
yes, certainly.
Thank you very much. Chairman, I'm Sangwan.
Okay. And Mr. McClatchy, we are now about to wind up our examination. So I do not know if you'd like to raise any final questions to the team. Mrs. Hazel Thompson Ahi, would you have any final questions? No, I don't. Mr. Paria?
I don't, Mr.
Not a
Chairman.
question, but I think, in fairness to, the industry and the way the contracting industry operates, it is not unusual where companies based on a relationship that they have with a particular contractor. If there are issues in the operation based on the history, because you can't put a value on relationship, it is not unusual for a company to pull a contractor in and say, look, fellas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these areas you need to tighten up. Otherwise, you may not be in a position to continue. So I know we hold no brief for any contractor here, but it is not unusual that, companies intervene and strengthen inefficiencies if you want to continue doing the work. And as long as they display that they have fixed these issues, we'll consider you going forward. So I just wanted to put that on the record, not to seem to be unfair to Kenson or any other contractor outside there. Thank you.
All right, well, Mr. Kwamina and your team from Heritage, Mr. Newman and your team from Paria, Madam Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Energy Industries, and our representative from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, Mrs. Sharon Mohammed, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, we would like to thank you for being here and being at least able to provide us with some clarification on several matters. As I said, our responsibility as a committee is to help improve the efficiency, efficacy, and economy of the enterprises that are before us. So I want you to keep that in mind or bear that in mind. However, we are looking after the public interests. That is our mandate. We want value for money. We want efficiency. We want efficacy and effectiveness. And we want economy as far as is practically possible. So sometimes my questions would be very firm because we are here protecting, advancing the public good. On that note, I just want to say before we close, Mr. Kwamina, we are going to monitor this company very closely, TPHL. We are looking forward in the not too distant future, I dare say by the first quarter of this year, no later than the second quarter, we should have in our possession the consolidated, audited financial accounts and statements from TPHL. If we don't get it, we will summon you again. And this time it won't be easy. Okay? So I just want to put you on notice. We are looking forward to receiving those consolidated reports, at least 2021. We could start with 20, end with 21. And then 22, 23 will come at the end of the year. But by the first quarter, no later than the second quarter, we should have 20 and 21. And work hard because you have plenty of money, okay? To get your business in order for the end of 2025 so we could get consolidated accounts. And I look forward to the day, even if you are not there as the chairman, or even if you are there as the chairman, we have our consolidated accounts up to date and up to mark. And I know you are committed to doing that.
I am.
Right? So we look forward to you doing that. So, Mr. Kwamina,
Yes.
on behalf of the committee once again, thank you, thank your team, and we thank all the officials from the various entities that are before us. We wish each and every one of you and your respective organization a very productive 2025.
Mr. Chairman, just permit me to
Yes,
reciprocate
yes,
your good wishes and to indicate that you should not describe your questions as being firm, but describe them as being fair.
Okay.
So thank you very much for the interaction today.
Thank you very much. And we now suspend these proceedings at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Kwamina and team.